Go ahead, Mick.
All right. Good evening. Welcome to the March 6th, 2024 Abington Finance Committee meeting. We are continuing to prepare for our April Fool's Day town meeting and hoping to get the budget balanced. We'll get an update on that. Hoping to get through most of the warrant articles to provide our recommendations and see exactly where we're at on all things financial, preparing for the FY25 budget. So we have discussion of the FY25 budget, review of the votes and recommendations on warrant articles, review of meeting minutes, which we have 3 sets of meeting minutes to review. Kelly's doing a great job getting them to us now. It's been excellent. Liaison reports, correspondence, which there is none. And then discussing our next meetings. So let's get right to it with a discussion of the FY25 budget and where it stands. When we discussed at this hour last week, we were, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, in the $300,000 to $400,000 gap range.
Yeah, and that's really, there is very little update since last week. We've been hearing back and forth from our health insurance vendor, and they haven't voted. The rates seem like they are going to be higher than we were told. We were starting somewhere in the 7s and given the hope that it was actually going to be in the 5s, and now we're back up in the 7.5% to 8% increase, which, from what I'm understanding, is less than some of the other plans that are out there. And I think Meyer is closer to 9 or 10, and I'm not really sure where Mayflower is, but I'm guessing they're somewhere in that 9 area also. So it was a bad year for us, but we're actually looking into maybe doing some modifications of the different plans that we offer that'll help reduce our costs next year. So, and we'll implement them like July 1 if we do them. And it'll just be things like adding, co-pays and updating co-pays and stuff like that. So.
Are you gonna talk with employees about that and do an informational, or how do you go about that?
It depends on how we go about it. We don't have to bargain it with them.
No, but I just mean to.
But, well, we're not looking to go up on our rates, so they'll have a choice of one or the other. But we're looking to get the recommendations on what we can do with the plans first, and then naturally we'll let everybody know what we're gonna do. That's really the biggest part of it. I mean, we still don't have our free cash. What we are finding in some of the plans that we have come up with that have got us to that, $300,000 or $400,000 gap, still do involve using some one-time monies, for funding some of the budget. So, what we are pretty optimistic that we will walk into town meeting with a balanced budget. It's still a tough year, and we fully expect to have to come up with we're gonna have to come up with a big plan for next year. And, we'll probably call upon this board to meet even after town meeting to help discuss some of that with us, because I think it's gonna be, it'll be dire.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Other than that, like I said, we really, we're working and meeting constantly with the school. They trimmed as much as they can to this point. I think you've seen what we've, taken out of the capital plan, or I've updated the capital plan with some of the things that are in there that we took out of their budget as far as books and stuff. But I did ask the fire chief to come here, and I think it was an item in the capital plan, the command C2 vehicle that you guys had some questions on, and so I just asked him to pop in so maybe we can get some input from him before his wife falls asleep without him.
That's okay, I'll stand up, that way you guys don't have to turn around too far. I apologize, it's easier for me to wander around rather than falling asleep. So, I apologize with the command cars if I didn't explain it thoroughly when we were putting in for the capital expenses, but just to give you a background on it. So, Carry that around. So we have 3 command cars, and I call them command cars, but they're 3 active cars that work every day, and that's my car, the deputy's car, and the fire prevention captain's car. My car, 24/7, it's on the road, I'm on call all the time with it. Same thing with the deputy, same thing with the fire prevention as well as the inspectional services. The C3, which is we call the fire prevention car, we got that through COVID money, and we were able to convert it later on, paint it and what have you. My vehicle was the deputy vehicle. When the chief retired, I kept that. The oldest of the 3 is the one the deputy's using right now. It's 2015, it's got 100,000 miles on it. It's taken a beating just as far as just the usage all the time, so that's what we're looking at. We need to have something reliable, like we had a fire the other night. He and I were there within 5 minutes. We're also going to, meetings as far as, different parts of the state, and we have to do that sometimes on a bi-weekly basis. So that's where it's at, and the cost that we put in there for the 60,000, every penny counts, especially with the budget, but it's a rock bottom price. We're really gonna be squeezing to get something in there through the state bid system if we're able to get that. But it's something that's definitely needed. It's not gonna be a vehicle, it's gonna be like an extra vehicle, something that's gonna be sitting around in the yard somewhere. It's gonna be active from the time it gets put in service. It's gonna replace the other one, and it's gonna be active on the road 24/7.
I want to touch on what kind of equipment goes into a command vehicle.
Command vehicle has that person's, say for the deputy, he has a command board for us when we get at the scene with the accountability board. He's got all of his gear. The deputy's also gonna have his state hazmat gear because he's a member of the state hazmat team. And then radios along those lines. We'll take the equipment from the old one, convert it. We're not looking for anything extra, we're not looking for an upgrade. We'll take the radios from the current C2 vehicle that's gonna be replaced, we'll switch it into the new one. So we're not looking for any type of upgrade with that, we just wanna get a more reliable vehicle.
Questions?
Are there issues that you're having with it now?
It's just gotten to that point, Greg, in the last year where it's not reliable and Marcus, our town mechanic, has had to go out on scene to take care of things when it breaks down or whatever. So we're getting to that point now, we realize it. And when we started playing with Scott last year and started looking at long-term stuff, this was one of them, as well as the engine that we had to kind of address now. Other stuff we can maybe put on the back burner for a year or two,
What'll happen in the existing one when you get a new one?
We haven't even decided that. At this point, if we get it, great, then we can make a decision from there, whether it be with another town department, whether it be with us as an extra vehicle to shuttle things through. I don't know.
If it's not reliable, you wouldn't really want to
Yeah,
put,
it'll likely be surplus to come for spare parts.
I wouldn't recommend it anywhere but locally, so if it was something that's
Yeah.
gonna be kind of a runaround vehicle in town here for whatever department, obviously we'd hang on to it, we'd love to if we could, but.
you can sell it at auction on the, right?
So,
And then for the fire engine, which engine are we replacing?
Engine 1, it's a 1996. So we rotate the vehicles through all the time through maintenance, and we're on the go. We had, the other day, I think we had 3 different times where we were 3 calls at once. Every engine was out on the road with extra guys coming in off duty. The problem we're running into with those is with all the delays since COVID and the country opening up again, there's delays in building stuff. Like right now, the new ambulance that we got at the town meeting, we're still trying to get monthly updates, hoping we're gonna get it in April. Not really, confident kind of going that route. So I'm meeting with some of the area chiefs. I talked with them and said, what's your success been? And what we were told from the Rev group, which is, they're the ones that actually own, Emergency One, Pierce, all of the fire trucks. Depending on what vehicle you get, your delivery date's gonna be anywhere from 2 to 4 years. What's happened is one of the more reliable, cheaper ended engines, they're all starting to go for those in the last year for obvious reasons. You're gonna get it sooner. They're at 3 years now. One of our couple towns away in West Bridgewater, they put in an order a year ago for their truck. It was $830,000, completely stripped down, and that's without anything on it. We're not looking to break the bank on it. He had an increase, but was able to argue through with them, we didn't qualify for that increase because we already were locked in with you guys. So they survived that. 900,000 is an incredible amount of money, but at the same time, we don't lock in for something. No doubt in my mind, the rate we're going, by this time next year, we're probably gonna be over that. And we're still gonna need the engine, so we may not receive this engine probably for 3 years.
And we won't actually borrow the money for it. Or at that point in time, maybe, it might get paid in free cash too. So we'll have that ability to do it.
We can make the commitment, we can spec it out, we can make the order and get the commitment there without having to use the money at this time.
Okay.
Other questions?
Okay, have a great night, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Right. Since Rick is here, shall we move to the charter?
Sure.
Welcome.
Stand, sit.
What do you want? Do you want to sit and
You want to sit, I'll bring us on.
slide on it? Oh, Dan's got you.
I guess the other question is, how into the weeds do you want? Do you want a full presentation? Do you want just the ones that affect, I guess, your work? I'm happy to spend an hour and a half telling you what a great job we've done over the past 6 months, so.
I think not the hour and a half version.
Okay.
Probably the
Highlights
focused on
and-
financial and highlights. I don't know if Scott shared my request for wiggle room with the date of town meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know if that got touched on.
Yep, that is actually a bylaw.
Okay.
So that's something that we refer to the bylaw committee, which starts their work as soon as we finish ours.
Yep.
So, the town charter, if someone wants to skip ahead, says in the town charter that we need to do this review every 10 years. Ideally, win a year that ends in a 4. So here we are. We've actually been meeting for over 18 months. I think we started meeting in September of 2022. And, it's been myself, for the most part, it's been myself, Rich Smith, Liam Adamczyk, and currently it's Amanda Zampetti, as well as Pete Walters. And if I want to skip to the next one, this was kind of the approach. We kind of set in some themes we wanted to go through. So let's take a look at good government, budgeting, structure, committees and commissions, town services, administration. If we look at everything through those lenses, what does that then tell us, or where does that kind of lead us? And so we reached out to a bunch of stakeholders, elected officials, town employees, department heads. We sent out a survey, we stood out in front of a town meeting. I think in all we got inputs from nearly 300 people in town. So we feel pretty confident that we've done a good job getting people involved and getting some diverse feedback. One of the things we did is we sent out a survey and had some interesting results. I think we want to skip ahead to the next one. So what we found was that overall people wanted to keep the current form of government, but there was a small group that you can't really, just kind of brush away, about 30%, who were interested in switching to a town council mayoral form of government. Abington would not be the smallest town in Massachusetts with a mayor. There are towns that are smaller, but generally it's larger towns. And we looked at that. We actually brought in the chief of staff for the mayor of Weymouth, because not only was he involved post-Weymouth switch, he was the finance committee chairman in Braintree when that town switched to a mayor. And so he's been involved in a couple different avenues. He gave some great insights. Basically, he said that those two towns had some unique structural deficiencies. Braintree was still on an executive secretary. And Weymouth, I think, was a town administrator. And those towns are just so big that that didn't make sense anymore. So for Abington, the other party said was basically, if your problem is the structure, that's one thing. If your problem are the people who are currently in office, that's a whole other thing, and a mayor necessarily won't get rid of that. So we feel kind of strongly that we have some good people in place, and that any issues we have as a town is not relative to the form of government that we have. So as of now, our recommendation is to keep the current form, keep the open town meeting. We are going to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that in a couple of years, 3 to 5 years, stick a finger in the wind, see if there's any rising interest, and maybe take another look at it, just kind of maybe do a little bit of a check-in. And if they are finding that there is continued interest, well, then we can take another look at it. But as of now, we don't see the need for it.
Rick, quick question. So is that 30% of that 300 people that gave their input, or
Well,
30% of?
About 200 people filled out the survey, maybe a little under 200.
Okay.
What was interesting was that the largest group of people who were interested in switching to the mayor were people who filled it out at the senior center, which I didn't expect. I thought they would more kind of keep things the way they are, but they were actually more gung-ho about switching to a mayor. So, we asked them, do we want to see the Board of Selectmen stay at 5 members, go to 3, go to 7? Again, the support was keep it at 5. Okay, that's easy enough. We asked them if any of the boards and committees who are currently elected or appointed should be switched in terms of how that is put together. Some interest in maybe making ZBA and the Finance Committee elected instead of appointed, but there really wasn't a huge groundswell. So at this time, we're just going to recommend that it stays the way that it is. And I think the ZBA and FinCom it's more of a accountability in terms of people aren't sure how the whole thing is put together. And so their default is, well, I don't have a say in who's elected to these or who's put on these committees. But then when you kind of explain how it works, it's not really a huge thing, so. And then some of the general questions, what we heard back a lot was, the town needs to better communicate with residents. I think you've probably heard a lot of the same in your communications with people around town. A lot of people just feel like it's hard to stay on top of what's happening in town, and that's for various reasons. We heard that people think the appointment process could be run a lot better. It's a little convoluted now currently.
Like appointments at town hall, or?
Like appointments to conservation, or if there's vacancies on elected boards, or open space committee, just how that whole process works. And
So not appointments as in, I'd like an appointment at 5 o'clock to meet with,
Right.
appointments
Being
as
appointed
in
to a
being
board.
appointed to a board.
board and committee appointments. Next slide.
How many people are in the town, residents?
Over 17,000.
So this is over 200? Is there any way to get more than 200 people? I think that's a horrific subset of people out of 17,000. I mean, the number is so low. And I'm not saying you didn't do it. I'm just saying to go with any of these things, it's so segmented.
It's up to town meeting to make the actual.
Say it again? No. I'm not. I'm just talking about like the.
Survey.
So he could have a better idea of like what the town. The 200 people out of 17,000 again.
It's more than it usually shows up at town meeting.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So
Which is
Yeah,
which is another issue.
it would have been great to have 11,000 respondents, or we have 10,000 registered voters. If we could have half of that. We put it out in a number of different areas. We stood outside town meeting. We had QR codes. We put it through a town-wide email blast. We had it on the website. Put it in online news. We did everything we can to get it out there. We went to the senior center and literally handed it out to people.
But when you send out the tax form, is it on there?
It wasn't at that time.
All right.
Or you could do the water bill,
Yeah.
right?
I just mean if somebody gets a
Yeah.
bill, they actually have to look at it
Right.
most likely in order to pay.
Simple to add stuff
Yeah.
to that.
Oh, I don't know.
It isn't.
Maybe a pamphlet inside the envelope.
It isn't. It sounds simple, but it
Yeah.
isn't.
Yeah.
All right.
Because there's a process that goes.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been great to have 3,000
Yeah,
respondents.
sure.
I think what we found was that the feedback we were getting from people matched up with the feedback we also got on the survey. So we felt confident that the 200 was a fairly representative number. I mean, if you do official polling and surveys, they're not doing huge swaths. They'll do 100 people here and there, or 50 people here and there. as long as, certain segments are represented. But again, what we saw in the survey was very much in line with what we were hearing otherwise, so we felt confident that we were on the right track. Yeah, and I think, so the other part was just kind of an interest in increased transparency from leadership and boards and committees, better way to find out information. There's certainly broad support for updating the name of the Board of Selectmen. I think that came up more than any other specific item. Maybe that's just the people I hang with, I don't know. But
To what?
to the select board.
Because of, because of,
Like for the same reason we don't have firemen and mailmen, we have firefighters and
Mail carriers.
Oh, sorry.
yeah, mail carriers. To degender it.
Oh, boy.
And then a couple other administrative things that we can go over further on. Next slide, please. So here's the recommendations, and I'm happy to stop and explain any one more in depth. First one is basically just to make sure that anytime committee members complete professional development training, whether you go to a seminar or whatever, there's a record of it kept at the town clerk's office, then that's becomes searchable. And ultimately, when it comes time for reappointment, reelection, those are records that can be part of the conversation. Town clerk is okay with it. They have a manner that they can say they can handle it. They're not going to go chasing people for it. They already have to maintain these things for open meeting law training, for ethics training. So they're confident they'll be able to handle it as well. But again, they're not going to go out and chase people down for it. If people want to come in and submit something, they'll be happy to take it.
So can you just clarify, so the ethics and open meeting are the only two that we're required to do right now as
By the
special
state.
state employees,
By the
correct?
state.
And so this is just any training above and beyond that, like if we went to the finance committee, annual, or
So for instance, Conservation Commission does a lot of training sessions, school committee does a lot of training sessions. We have Citizens Planning, Training Council for planners coming up. If I went to that, I could then, just put something in the record that I went to that. The idea is to encourage committees to have their members grow their knowledge base. And not just, I know it's a lot of extra work too, but the more that we can encourage committee members to, I won't say professionalize, but, expand their knowledge base, the better off our committees are overall.
And our insurance company appreciates it. We get points for it as people do it, and it actually turns into discounts at the end of the year. Enough people do it, we could save $30,000-$40,000 a year
for what type of insurance?
for
The liability.
overall liability.
Okay. I mean, some of that though, like with school, if you're a school committee member and you go to a training, you're still elected, so it doesn't, you can argue that point to the voters, but it's not gonna matter how many trainings you have on file with the clerk's office.
Right.
To them, no, but to
The insurance company.
us it does. Yeah, ultimately, we actually get it for training for employees and stuff too. It does save us a lot since we've been working with Maya.
I mean, what we found is in some occasions, wasn't a common occasion, but some occasions you have someone who's on a committee 12 years and has never, taken any sort of professional development. It just shows up for the monthly meetings, and that's kind of the extent, and it's kind of flatline. So the idea is to encourage that, continue to grow as you're in these roles. So the second one, improve public engagement and board transparency. This one essentially acknowledges or encourages boards and committees to see the open meeting law as a floor and not a ceiling, and what they can do when it comes to public engagement and outreach. So there are certain things that boards are required to do, but it doesn't prohibit boards from going above and beyond that. And what this does is put into our charter, we want our committees and boards to have conversations and set policies and committee rules and processes that make them ask the question, what can we do to get more people involved in this work? So for instance, on the planning board, under state law, we only have to send out public hearing notices to abutters. Okay, great. What if we said, you know what, that's not enough, we think it should be abutters of abutters, or it should be anybody within 100 yards of this area, so that we're going above and beyond what is required. And and getting more people involved and knowledgeable and that sort of thing. Part of it also is establishing, okay, when can people participate in meetings? What is their availability? How can they send in testimony? How can they get questions answered? How can they speak on an issue? Again, have those rules formalized and people able to review them, look at them, and go from there. Board and committee operations is kind of related to that one, but one of the pieces of that is there are a number of boards who do a terrible job actually approving minutes and then making them available for public some consumption. Like your minutes are supposed to be stored at the town library, and very few are. So it's kind of reminding people that no, this is actually one of your requirements, is to have minutes and approve them and get them finalized and make them available. So it won't just be at the town library, it's also available on the website, et cetera, et cetera. Clarify deputy town moderator for recusal. The language currently doesn't say that a deputy town moderator can be appointed for purposes of conflicts.
Like a conflict with the moderator.
Yeah. And sometimes we have moderators who have conflicts with topics that come up and has to recuse himself appropriate, which is appropriate. But it doesn't specifically say that in the town charter language. So this just adds that sort of language in there to clarify. Number 5 is one, frankly, we haven't decided if we're going to officially recommend or not. We keep going back and forth on it. The idea is some towns have a ban on town employees seeking public office. So interestingly, we can't actually prohibit people from running for office. What we can say, however, is that if you are an elected person, you can't then also collect a paycheck from a town. So there are people who think that's a good thing. There are people who say, well, you're talking to people who are involved and live in town and care about the town and want to be involved beyond their jobs, and that they should be able to have a role. And then you get into the whole idea of, well, why can't you have somebody who's a teacher run for the library board? There's no overlap there, there's no oversight. Or why can't you have somebody who works on DPW run for the school committee? So the conversation now comes down to, can you write language in a way that allows people to run if there's no direct oversight of their work role? Frankly, we're still kind of working on this one. And it might get to the point where we're going to have to pull it because it's not where we want to be. And frankly, I think almost to a person, we all have conflicts in terms of, do we really want to see this?
And probably I'm just thinking logistically, or how one person perceives an overlap, like DPW and school, run for school committee. One person may not perceive that as anything to do with each other, but then when you're discussing budget issues, you could say that it does have something to do with each other. So that would be kind of dicey also.
We've had situations where town employees have been on the board of selectmen and they've recused themselves during contract negotiations appropriately. But if they're involved in other contract negotiations, does that then have a ripple effect to their own bargaining unit? It starts to get a little bit more complicated the more you kind of peel it back. So that's why we're kind of like...
And it's hard to get people to volunteer for positions to begin with, so do you want to thin the herd?
Yeah.
Or not the herd, do you want to thin the pool, thank you, the pool of people that you have to step up and...
Yeah, and I don't want to embarrass anyone specifically, but we have some people who work for the town on a part-time basis. And they are wonderful people, and they help the town in many ways, and they are elected officials. And it would be a shame to lose them and to lose their voice. So it's kind of like I'm still figuring this one out, to be honest.
Isn't this covered in the state ethics laws anyways?
Yep. So there are certain, so there are ethical things. I think actually there's a prohibition on teachers running for school committee in their towns. I think that's a whole separate thing, if I'm not mistaken. But it's basically says you can't discuss topics that affect your job personally. But again, what are kind of those, secondary effects where technically you don't have to, but really there is kind of a, shadow effect or something.
I believe it also creates a freeze. You can't, if a police officer or firefighter was to be on the board of selectmen, the way I understood it, they would not be eligible for any sort of
Oh,
promotions
right.
that would be under the
Because that's
purview of the board
who,
of selectmen, like, so couldn't become the chief or the deputy chief or something to that, but, and that's just who the state ethics. You know, and how often that is gonna be an issue.
So we're still, I think, taking some thoughts from people on this one. This might be a game time decision in terms of if it goes forward, to be honest. But the reason it's even considered is because we have had a number of people say to us, oh, I assumed that there already was a ban. And why wouldn't we have one? So we're wrestling with it still. Update qualifications for town manager position. This is very clear. We don't want Scott to ever leave, so whatever his
But you
qualification.
didn't want me back.
No, the
Depends on
current,
who you ask.
the current requirements is that they have to have a bachelor's degree. And when I was on the committee that recommended Scott, and frankly, we overlooked that part. And frankly, Scott was the best qualified candidate for the job, and I think he's proven that it worked out in the end. So, and this also aligns with kind of an initiative that the Healy administration has taken on too, which is, yes, you can say that college degrees are a good thing, but maybe there are going to be candidates where you don't have to have a college degree at the time. So someone who's been in a government position for 25 years and has excelled and has gone up to leadership ranks and is qualified for a town manager role, why shouldn't you at least be able to consider that person? And then you can make a requirement that they get those advanced degrees later on. But, if we had followed charge, the TV would not have hired Scott. So this just opens up the option to consider people who have who have demonstrated professional capabilities.
So what would be the difference? Meaning we hired somebody that didn't have it, and then it was in the charter, but it worked out. What's the difference?
I kind of think that if it's in the charter, we should try to abide by it. It's kind of like the town constitution. So if we see that there's a part of the town charter that doesn't work or doesn't make sense, then let's make it work, rather than just ignoring it. I'd rather tweak it than ignore it. That makes sense.
Didn't we, with Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we hire you as sort of interim town manager?
Yeah, that was the workaround.
Until we put that in place, so we were
That's
able
the
able to work around it that way, but rather
Yep.
adjust the rules to fit
Yep.
the actual scenarios.
And there certainly are avenues where people can start their government careers in positions that don't require college degrees. They work their way up to get professional accreditations, get experience with senior management roles, but just never have that degree. So what we're saying is that you don't have to hire that person, you don't have to target that person, but it can at least be part of the conversation. We'll wake up the screen.
It kicked me off the Wi-Fi.
I should know this all by now anyway. Yeah, so the next one is just to modernize the Board of Selectmen to the Select Board. A lot of other towns have done this already. We're a little bit behind on this one. Level set police and fire chief terms of contracts. We haven't ever figured out a reason why it was set up this way, but currently the chief of police does not have a cap on the length of contract. It is basically a, what's the word?
Evergreen.
Evergreen.
Yeah, I mean,
Interminable.
yeah.
It's not for a set length of time. So the police, the fire chief gets for a 5-year term. The police chief, that cap does not exist.
I think that goes back to,
The record is 20 years, so. I don't know why it was done that way. It was before my time here, but that's the way it is. The current chief agreed to a term on his appointment because we had started this process. But basically, it puts the terms at the same as between the fire and the police chief. Am I missing any details on that?
No, it's kind of important that we had the ability to have an end date to a contract where all parties can review where they're at and decide what they want to do going forward. But it was difficult to do it with the police chief.
So number 9 is the one that you're probably really interested in. We have taken some of the, I don't want to say criticisms, but some of the concerns about how the process works and tried to tweak it a little bit. 2 things really. One is to take out some of the strict timelines that are currently in the town charter, which frankly don't work because of how the budget process works in real life, how the state budgeting process works, and builds in a little flexibility. Basically what we're saying is that there'll be a process, a stated process, but that's going to be set by town bylaw and by the board of selectmen and town manager's financial policies. So they'll have a schedule, this is how it'll work. But it'll be based on those things rather than the town charter, which has a whole other set of requirements that are a little bit more unwieldy. We do add language in there though to try to increase the amount of, I don't want to say transparency because I don't want people to take it as it's opaque currently, but more just opportunities for some public awareness. And the big one is the first selectman meeting of the new year. The town manager will put on a dog and pony show about the budget, do a budget presentation. This happens in a lot of other towns already, kind of borrowed language from other communities. So that we kind of consider that the starting point for the conversation. So here's what we're looking at, here's the revenues that we're working off of, here's the expenditures, here's the problems, here's the services we're kind of questioning, et cetera, et cetera. Basically give that kind of one-time big picture of the town budget. And then obviously this whole process goes forward.
When you say new year, is it calendar year?
New calendar year, yep. So, and of course, with the understanding that it's going to change significantly.
I was just gonna say,
over
because
the next
when we
12
get
weeks.
into, when we get into January, and we go through this every year, where we're in January and we're looking to start the budget process, but a lot of it is, we go over a whole lot of information and then it all changes for the good or the bad, you know. It can be a very, very different picture a month and a half later, a month later,
Yep.
3 weeks later.
So part of it was, recognizing that I know the House is debating its budget tonight, I think. The government files their budget in late January. A lot of towns we've looked at kind of look towards that early January starting point. Like, here's a starting gun, the race is beginning, this is the facts we're dealing with to start with. There's nothing prohibits Scott from doing this on a monthly basis if he really wants to. Or having a final presentation the week before town meeting.
When do we the past few years, when have we, what's been the timeline for a joint resolution?
From the state?
Yeah, as far as,
The end of January.
Late January, early
Late
February.
January, we might have gotten something, but last year it was later.
They're not working well right now together.
And to be quite honest with you, I don't expect them to get much better. I think the numbers that we have are probably as good as we're going to see. I would hope not to see reductions, but if we do see reductions, I don't think they'd be dramatic reductions. But I don't.
And just to point out for anybody who has not been following every meeting, the first we saw those numbers from the governor's budget was
The day they were due, right?
what, about a month ago?
Yeah, so late
The
January.
third Wednesday in January
Yeah.
or something like that.
Which is
fourth
just
Wednesday.
And we have been meeting in our process since December. So 3 months into our process, we got state numbers, or the start of state numbers.
And they weren't they weren't what was promised.
Right.
and we do, the makeup of our town does rely on
State aid.
state aid.
Yeah, I mean, we rely on it quite a bit.
More than a
Also-
town like Cohasset
Well, most of
or,
the school department relies on it quite a bit, and especially the last few years. And so, and we rely on that increase that we expect, and increases have been, forecasted for several years by the previous and the current administration, and they just haven't come to fruition, so.
So I think I would specifically request this committee to look at the language and point out any problems that you would see in the next 3.5 weeks. Luckily, we don't have to have a public hearing to make changes, we can just make changes. To make sure it all flows well and works well, because there is a little bit of reworking. It was kind of, we had a couple of pieces scattered in this section, a couple of pieces in this section, a couple in this section. We're trying to stitch it together a little bit. I think the two big key takeaways is take away the hard dates, and as long as there is an established financial policy between bylaws and the Board of Selectmen's financial policies, that's the schedule for the budget process. And the second is have that January show, make it a presentation that can be posted online or somewhere that people can, because right now, that was one of the notes we heard was, it's hard to get a full budget until basically the night of town meeting, or a couple weeks before town meeting. They'd like to be able to have some more of that information in their hands early.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and again, I don't want this to be a criticism of Scott, how he's handled the whole thing. But that's certainly the feedback we heard is they want more understanding of how this all kind of flows together. So please look through the language and let me know any thoughts.
Do you already have a plan of changing those hard dates and a different language?
Yeah, the text is already on the website.
Okay.
I forwarded to Scott, but I can forward to everybody else in the
Forwarded to everybody this afternoon.
Okay, yep. I didn't
So
see
you do
that.
have a PDF of this, which has the draft proposals for everybody. I didn't print it out because it just didn't.
Some of those hard dates has not been an issue, like with Scott or even before Scott, more recently before Scott. But some of those hard dates were important to actually, for us as a committee, to actually get information in a timely manner from prior town managers. So,
I'm trying to pull up some of the, one of it was, one of the dates was, 30 days before it's submitted to the finance committee, he has to,
Yeah, well, there's a hard date, the two hard dates, and basically it brings you mid-December and then mid-January or
Yeah.
something to that effect, and it's 30 days before the hard date to give you the budget, which is we're giving you a budget. I think the one we handed you was $1.9 million or maybe even more, $2 million something out of whack. So I could hand everybody a balanced budget in January 1st, but it's going to be devastating news to a lot of people because it's not.
I'm not complaining about when
No, but
you've
that's
got
what I'm
things to
saying.
us.
So
I'm
we can have
saying,
the hard date, but the information that you're getting isn't.
I was more
nearly
trying to
as
make the
helpful.
point that right now, leeway with the dates is I think is not an issue because we are getting everything in a very timely manner. I don't know that finance committees in the future would have that same, so I think would want the language to be somewhat narrow, but not too maybe not as narrow as it is right now.
open to suggestions.
I'll take a look at
What
it.
are the ramifications to Matt's point earlier, just moving town meeting to like June 1st, and then we start the budget process when we have the governor's recommendation, so at least we know what a baseline is to move forward with.
And just to quickly add to that, we know that Scott and Andrew and the town departments started before it actually comes in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
So just to clarify, you're saying starting our portion of the budget process at that point.
Yeah, we start early no matter what, and we always, and really since I've been here, and my things changed dramatically. I think for the most part, we start off with, you're gonna do a level service budget, do this, but tell us what you need beyond that, so we can relay it to the town.
I think to Andrew's point, the hard part for us with early April is, as you said at the start of the meeting, we still don't know our free cash number, so we can't, like, until we know that, we can't really get into what we're doing with capital, which affects other parts of the budget.
And it's hard for us
This
to
year,
vote
at least,
without
it's hard
exact,
for
we
us
can't
to
vote
know. We're
without an
getting
exact.
down to a few weeks to go before town meeting, and we don't have hard set numbers. So it makes it
May wouldn't hurt my feelings.
makes it yeah. And I think most of the years that I've been on the committee, we did May. There was
And we
maybe
delay.
one or 2 years that we did June because it pushed out, I think because of the vote for the new school, and now we've moved it to what the charter says. And like last year and this year, we've done what the charter says, and we've made it work, but
Yeah,
May,
it's a lot.
May certainly has given us more ability to digest and understand what it is that we're
Well, we have more exacts by
that
then.
we're voting on and what it is that we're presenting in front of the town.
The only, I think, possible connection might be also with town elections. So that if you have town meeting before town elections, town meeting is kind of like, all right, everything's wrapped up, term ends, get elected, process starts again.
Oh, I would change the vote.
Yeah,
You're
well,
gonna
that's the
change
thing, you
one,
have to
you have
change
to change
the
the
vote,
vote, yeah.
So we didn't take up the date of the annual town meeting because it's actually not set by the charter, it's set by bylaw. It hasn't been part of our conversation, but I mean, there are towns who do it, I think, in late March, and there are towns that do it in early June, so.
Yeah.
Is the date of election set by
One
bylaw
town
as
that's
well?
gonna be doing it
That's
Saturday,
bylaw too.
this week.
It could be addressed in the next step.
But they're doing it this week?
Pembroke, was it
Duxbury. They do it.
Duxbury?
It's the second Saturday of March.
I think also too, probably because we used to have the fall town meeting, so it was a good enough time span to, like April, and we've kind of been doing things differently the last few years.
Well, that's for the next committee then.
Next slide. So getting into the appointment process, we kind of split out the process for elected boards and committees versus appointed boards and committees. And even a little bit further deeper to boards and committees appointed by, for instance, the town clerk or the moderator, because they're committees of one, basically. So one of the biggest changes with the filling vacancies on elected boards, so that's Board of Health, Planning Board, School Committee, etc., is that technically the charter doesn't say when they have a joint meeting who chairs that meeting. So technically, if you wanted to, if the Board of Health or let's say Planning Board had a vacancy and they go and sit with a selectman, they can have two concurrent meetings at the same time and appoint two different people. Because it never says who's running that meeting. So we specifically say that the chair is basically the Board of Selectmen chair, but the first nomination comes from the board with the vacancy. Because right now it's just whoever shouts the loudest and shouts first. And the chair of one of the boards can certainly ignore all the other comments as well. So basically it then goes back and forth. So the board with the vacancy appoints the first person, then Board of Selectmen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The other change is that the appointment needs the majority vote from both committees. Right now, it's just kind of total numbers. So if you have a larger board and a smaller board, it's
Majority individual boards or
So-
majority of that group?
of both, so it comes by camera. So let's say if it's the Board of Selectmen and a vacancy in the Planning Board, both the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board have to have a majority vote to approve that person. You can't have a situation where
One does and one
the
doesn't.
entire Board of Selectmen votes in favor of one person,
Yeah.
the entire other board votes against it,
Right.
as we've seen. That's kind of the main change with that, I believe. And there's also some language in there about just making sure people get a chance to have a public interview if they want one. What happens if there's no candidates or if there's only one candidate and the board of selectmen wants some more? Do they have to reapply? You know, kind of some of those other questions that have popped up over the past couple of years. Clarify library director appointment process. I think actually this one, the first part of this is going to be pulled. I shouldn't be in there still. They came to us with a question about who really appoints the library director. Is it the town manager as the chief personnel officer, or is it the library board of trustees? So the language is a little fuzzy.
Who won?
I'm not sure yet. It's gone back and forth a little bit.
Who appointed the current library?
So right now, it's the library board of trustees chooses the person basically with the consent of the town manager. So we've gone back and forth. I just need to make sure that we've agreed on what the town manager should be. The second part, though, is essentially clarifying who has day-to-day oversight of the library employees. And I think Scott has seen this, and you don't have any objections with it. Like, do you want to have oversight of the library employees?
I'm good.
It specifies currently that, for instance, the superintendent oversees all the school employees, and the housing director oversees all the housing authority employees. But then when it comes to library employees, it doesn't quite say who does what. So it wouldn't make sense basically to have the town manager have to defer all of everything to the library director or vice versa. So it just clarifies that the library director is in charge of the day-to-day management of the library employees.
Which would make sense, because what does the town manager know about the,
About the library?
well, I just mean the.
He's always in the
I
library,
know
see him
the
there
new
constantly.
decimal system.
Okay,
Read the minutes.
point made.
Minutes,
And just
all day.
constantly.
Sure.
One thing we've discovered through this process is realizing that there is no enforcement clause in the town charter. So basically, it's just a worthless piece of paper in some ways that you don't have to actually pay attention to. I assume there's some sort of judicial review or something if someone really had a problem, but it just states that really as the town manager needs to be kind of the person who makes sure that people are abiding by the terms of the charter, and if not, to figure out what the next step is. So for instance, if there's a committee that just refuses to adopt minutes and file them away as they're supposed to, it's the town manager who can say, under the authority of the charter, I can go talk to this committee and say, get your act together, for example. Clarify terms of bylaw review committee. They're supposed to meet every 5 years, but technically by the language that's in there now, they should already be meeting concurrently with the charter review. It makes more sense to start their work after the charter review finishes theirs. So it just kind of clarifies when that process begins. It's a little bit of an administrative thing. There's a couple small administrative things in there. And the last really one with any sort of substance is, again, kind of going back to committee operations, just having some sort of onboarding process for new members, whether it's making sure they have the bylaws or whatever it is. Just have something so they're not just walking into a meeting with a notebook and a pen and saying, okay, now what? At least have, this is who you talk to, this is what you need to read, this is what you need to come up to date on, et cetera, et cetera. Get them the best, I don't know. So those are the recommendations. These are just some other things we recommending to other people. So for instance, as you mentioned, having the board take a look at the form of government change. For the bylaw review committee, clarifying the committees have the ability to restructure throughout the year. Apparently that was a question because it neither says you can or can't. And so depending on the attorney you talk to, that would either mean that if it doesn't say you can, that means you can't, or whatever. But,
Like if you needed a new chairman, it doesn't say you can or can't.
yeah, so we've had committees that have restructured in the middle of the year. And there are other committees who got an opinion from town council saying, no, you can't do that. You have to stick with your current chairperson until next May. So we're just clarifying, we're like the bylaw to clarify that, yes, you can reorganize at some point throughout the year if you choose to. Someone brought up the idea of a stipend for the Board of Selectmen, and so we think that might be a bylaw thing to look at. Doesn't prohibit it currently in the charter, but if someone really wants to pick up that and run with it, that's what we're bylaw thing.
Stipend is in money?
Yes. It was a common thing up until early 2000s.
you know, we're flush with cash.
I was just thinking, which,
Of the town.
in that $300,000 to
I don't know
$400,000
when next week,
deficit.
You used to get stipend and health insurance. I mean, that was some sweet plums. Wow. There was some question about whether the board should have other alternate and associate members. So for instance, conservation has associate members, zoning board has alternate members. It might be worth looking at some other boards if they want to start to, you know, adopt that as well. So, and then the other bylaw is the last charter reviews created DPW and put a lot of responsibilities under that umbrella. But we didn't then change up the committee assignments and missions. So we have some committees out there that are kind of unclear what their current mission is. I speak very carefully since my wife is chairwoman of Parks and Rec, and it's her favorite thing in the world. But you know, there's a little bit of question about really what is their role when DPW is in charge of all field maintenance and recreation upkeep. Are they just a policy setting board, an advisory board? Open space, how does that fit into everything in terms of management of the town's parks and passive recreation areas? And then the reason to throw in Strawberry Golf is because Island Grove technically generates money. So do you want to rather have one committee that oversights kind of the enterprise fund side of the whole thing? Then another one that takes over the passive recreation side of things? I don't know. But that conversation just hasn't been had in the past decade, and it probably should be had. And it might help clarify, streamline some things. So, I think the next one is just kind of Mark's, who's been on the committee. We've had a couple people pop on and leave, but what's remarkable is just everyone really has contributed to this process. Everyone came with thoughts and opinions. We haven't all agreed on everything, but it's been a very productive committee, and we've worked well, and they deserve a lot of credit for this. So, again, we still have 3.5 weeks to make changes, so if you have ideas, still open.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you for the time,
Anyone have
too.
questions?
I am gonna tell your wife, you said we should get rid of the Parks and Rec.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Direct quote.
I heard-
support whatever she supports. All right, Rick.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that wraps up the introduction to our meeting. So that was budget where it stands. That kind of covered some of the warrant articles that we'll get to. Anyone have other questions on the overall budget? Comments, things they want to bring up at this point? We're meeting with schools next week.
Schools will come in next week, and I think you'll have like I said, a quick visit from Board of Health to explain the stables.
Okay.
John Riley will come in, I think it was Memorial Field. Any questions on?
Yeah, there's a warrant article item about Memorial.
Yeah, so he'll come in for those two items and for whatever else you might want to ask him about, and we'll just get on with the schools.
Was there an update on free cash? No, okay.
Has anything changed in that? No, right?
Did anything change? Yeah, so, and actually, I think the changes that were in here, I removed a couple items from the school department, that they said that they didn't want to do, which was, parking down at, new paving at Beaverbrook. It was a $750,000 project. It was playground equipment for Beaverbrook that they don't want to replace right now. And, the ramp, ADA ramp for the Folio School. So we took all that out. If depending on what happens and we wanna deal with it, we can deal with it in the fall.
Is that roughly $2 million?
Yeah. And that was, again, we don't have a free cash number yet, it was just more that they requested it. You know, it wasn't really a good time to do those things anyway, so. Other than that, I did fill in, although you already voted, I did renumber everything.
I appreciated that.
So, you know, Sean's gonna get his hands on this and he may change it.
There are no longer 2 number 5s,
You don't know.
which is definitely helpful.
That
There is a new
helpful.
number 4, because it can't, I did add an article for, and the reason I put it up in that spot is just, it seemed like a good place to put it, but, so we had to replace the police station camera system, and this isn't like the outside cameras, but this is a lot of the inside cameras and cameras that are in the surveillance rooms and, you know, where they bring the, you know, the prisoners and sweat the poop out of them. Those cameras, there were problems with them and problems with the software that runs them, and they weren't able to capture what is essentially evidence and keep it. So they were running into problems at the courthouse. We were pretty much, you know, by the courts and is, you know, fix your problem. So we had to go in there. We were hoping to use opera money or something to that effect, but we hadn't, and we didn't. Still, so we put it in here to use free cash to pay for it.
And that's 70,000.
Yeah.
Is there like oh man. Is there like a place that they have to go to get these cameras? It's like there's, I don't know, I probably shouldn't talk.
My guess is it's not Best Buy.
Yeah. Well, although,
I'm just saying, like the technology is pretty.
Yeah, well, it wasn't just the cameras, it's the hard drives and the software.
And the
that work
backup
with it,
stuff.
that back it up and retain it, and it's all compliant for whatever they're submitting for evidence.
and it probably comes with a warranty,
Yeah, I'd like to think
I
so.
hope.
But this system was probably as old as whenever the.
When it was built.
Station, so 12
Yeah.
years or so. I did pop in the number for Article, what is now Article 9, you already voted on, the student transportation. If that's the number that you voted, so I just put it in here. It is an accurate number. I also put in, the next one would be the numbers that Andrew had given us for the accrued liabilities, so what's now number 20 and 21. The accrued liabilities and compensated absences fund for 166. And we'll use free cash to fund that. And then the unemployment fund, Article 21, 106,000, and that'll be a free cash article also. And you did not vote on those ones yet. Alright, I think that's really, like they said, other than the numbers, you'll see there's an Article 29 that's been added. It's to revoke the opioid settlement stabilization fund that we did at the special town meeting. Because the legislature did approve language that negated the need to do that. So initially, when once we got this settlement and all these funds were coming, they said this is all you can use this money for, but they didn't say how you can get it. We're gonna give you the money, we're going to the general fund. They didn't say you could set up a fund for it,
To get it out.
to get it out. So that's why we set up the fund for it, thinking that was the only way. And then they just came out with their, I think it was probably just after town meeting, after the special, probably shortly after that, they came up with some sort of amendment that said we no longer have to do that, that we can spend it.
On specific,
Still the same thing.
yeah.
You can only use it for specific items, but we don't have to set up a stabilization fund, and we don't have to go to town meeting every time we wanna spend something.
Okay.
That was voted, so we set up the stabilization fund in the fall special town meeting, and then in December, they
They
fixed
came
it.
out and stuff, okay.
So if we vote to revoke it, or if we vote to revoke the stabilization fund, we can put it in a special revenue fund and treat it like a grant. Which
And what's the benefit, other than that we don't have to go to
Right, so
town
as a
meeting?
grant, the committee will be able to spend it on the projects that are approved,
As they come in.
right,
Okay.
as they come in. You don't have to go to town meeting to vote on every single project.
How did we vote on the ban of Falls?
We voted to defer. We'll go through each of the articles again, listing out what we did last week, as a couple of people were not here. If we want to reopen discussion on that, or for the ones that we didn't vote on, what we're gonna do.
Whether, do they, Board of Health will be here next week, so you can discuss it with them.
Yeah.
And B, they gave me the indication that they weren't necessarily married to the idea
And
as it is, so I'm not sure where that discussion's going, but then they may come back and say they want to withdraw it.
to give you the thumbnail version of our discussion last week was, from a finance committee standpoint, there is negligible at best financial impact to the town regarding the ban.
Unless you're trying to enforce it.
Unless we're trying to enforce it. There's a potential negative financial impact if we're trying to enforce it, but outside of that, there's negligible financial impact. So while we each have our own personal opinions on it, and I think some of us have strong opinions on it, from a town financial standpoint, there's not a lot to
I'm sure we can
discuss, but we can discuss it with the Board of Health next week. So, but starting to actually starting the process with the articles, going back through. Article 1 is snow and ice costs, which we are nearing the first day of spring. We are nearing the equinox, or it's the equinox for spring.
my snowblower away.
We're hoping not to have to spend any more money.
We are nearing the first day of spring.
snows again, it's my fault.
Is all that I will
That's the way
say.
too.
Putting the snowblower away.
So we are hopeful that the number that we have spent is at least relatively close to final, but I don't think that we want to make a final vote on that one yet. And we also don't know our free cash number, so it's hard to vote on the amount to
Without an exact amount.
spend. Article 2 is payment of prior year bills. I know we have a number on there, and we talked about it being 2 bills. But as of last week's meeting, we did not vote because the word was there might be more.
We're still collecting.
Still collecting, so we will hold off on that because we might have something that should have come in by the end of June last year that could still come in March of this year. Article 3 is the payment of sick leave buyback, which we voted last week to recommend. Is there any desire to reopen Article 3? Not seeing any. Article 4 is new. That's the police station camera system. That is intended to be paid for out of free cash. Is there-
Yeah, and I'd be happy, Wayne Norling probably the best one to speak to this if you folks want to have
If we have questions,
Yeah.
is there?
at least the technology part of it, the fact.
Yeah, before we go into any details on this, is there a motion
Motion to approve for,
recommendation?
motion to approve recommendation for compensation purposes.
It's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Discussion on Article 4. So I was a little, just for the record, I was a little lax last week with the motion before the discussion. trying to
You're on top
correct
of
myself
yourself.
to get back into that. So.
Like, do they have multiple bids on this? Like, is this, they have to go out to bid on this?
Yeah, they went through a state bid list vendor.
Again, this is gonna sound super dumb, but like, we can't ring camera this, we can't figure out, I mean, there's so many different companies that do this at this particular point.
Yeah.
And they're all, you said storage, there's no storage anymore, everything's on the
In the
cloud,
cloud.
like,
Well,
I
no,
just,
this is probably not on the cloud. This is probably something that is
I think-
securely stored in there. This is evidence.
I know there's requirements.
Yeah.
that's what I mean,
I'm
like,
sure there are requirements. I do know that, like public cloud versus private cloud, there are definitely significant security
But they must have to back it up
steps
to
that
a
private
hard
cloud
copy of
takes.
something, right?
So it's not.
Again, I'd be
Or
happy
like a
to have
physical
Wayne come
something
in and
that-
go
oh,
through
okay.
all of the nitty gritty with you. I just know that they needed to do it and they need
Yeah,
to do
I
it
think-
ASAP.
I think if we are running
Mm.
afoul of courts because our technology is not correct on this, I don't think we want people who should be punished for their crimes against the community to get off because we have bad cameras. Would be
Way to put it.
my personal opinion.
Although now's the time if you want to do something.
Is this something that we want to
Do we want to have Wayne
hash
come
out
in,
and
or
have Wayne come
Does
in?
anyone have
I don't
the
feel that I'll get that much more information.
right?
He'll just say we need it. I understand your
And Wayne,
questions. but I
Wayne
don't
is
think
really
I'm gonna
good.
get
He'll
any
give us
information.
more information. I don't know how many of us will understand
Like,
that more
exactly, I
information.
won't feel like I'm
Or
any
have,
better
or at least have a
Yeah.
point of comparison for that more information.
I mean, I would expect that if the court is raising an issue, then the court has requirements that we need to meet, and that this system would meet those requirements.
And we have to go about it as a, we're not a private
State bid.
entity for the state bid because we're a municipality, so we don't get a lot of say-so in,
And Scott and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, this will come out of free cash, which means that if we don't have if we don't have enough free cash for this and everything else that we already had, something else that we would be paying for from free cash will have to
Something we'll have to give.
come off the list. So it's not like this is part of balancing the budget that we're throwing it in there and we have to make up the money somewhere else. It's balancing our capital and other spending. So
and money in the bank,
sort of.
not really in the bank.
So, let's vote.
Any other discussion? Chris is asking to move the question. No further discussion. There's a motion to recommend approving Article 4. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. We recommend Article 4. Article 5 is the budget. We've already talked about the budget and we're not ready to vote on the budget unless anyone thinks otherwise. Article 6 is the capital plan, which we're also not ready to vote on unless anyone else thinks otherwise.
I did make a note, I did clarify, water department was retained earnings.
Yep.
Fire department is a free cash for that vehicle. Just to, without the updates.
And then, and noting for people who were not here or may not have watched last week's meeting, the school has agreed to move purchasing of laptops and textbooks into free cash capital and out of the budget to try and help us get to a balanced budget. So we don't like to do that, but when we're tight, sometimes we do.
The laptops, we do.
And we've done that.
The laptops, we do like to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I do anyway, that was my preference, was to
We have done that in
Committee's
past.
preference is recurring costs, like the recurring yearly cost to do in the budget, but we do understand your perspective there. Article 7 is the fire engine, the new fire engine, which Chief discussed while he was here. We voted 5-1 last week to recommend that. And does anyone want to take back up the fire engine article? Without seeing anyone, we will continue. Article 8 is the Community Preservation Budget. Community Preservation Committee was here and presented last week. We voted to recommend unanimously. Does anyone care to reopen Article 8? I'll pause while I remember in my notes. Does not look like anyone wants to reopen that article. Article 9 is annual funding of student transportation, which Scott has put the correct number in there, which we had the number net last week, but it wasn't in the handout that we had. But we did vote to recommend last week. Any interest in reopening Article 9? Without any, Article 10 is funding health imperative. Article 11 is funding ARC of the South Shore. We voted to recommend both of those. Is there any interest in reopening? Without any, we'll move along. Article 12, matching grant funding. So for those not here last week, this one was creating. What were we doing with this? We were putting money aside in a line item, in a fund. Where were we putting it?
It's a line item that could be used for future grants.
So if we have a grant where we have to provide matching funds for the grant, to have a line item that we pull the matching funds out of so that we don't have to wait for another town meeting to appropriate those funds, essentially. Typically, when the budget comes around, the departments are presenting to us, they know they at least have a ballpark of the grants that they're going for, but don't necessarily have all of the information and all of the cost. So
Was this voted on?
we did not vote on this one last week.
Do we have an idea of the dollar amount that we want to?
Or where we'd get that from?
I'd say about 50K of free cash.
From
free
free
cash.
Yeah.
Is that usually the match amount is around 50K for these grants?
No, it depends, and it depends on the type of grant.
Yeah.
Sometimes the grants come in, they expect a little bit of input monetarily, and we also are able to use like employee time as matching. But, it just depends, you just never know, all different grants are looking for different things.
And has there been one recently that you can think of?
There's the elite fire radios for 16K. There's a matching grant amount.
I think it was like 5% or something.
Oh, okay. So the 50K could help us with situations like that.
Yeah, so part of the discussion last week was this wasn't a specific grant that we were looking at, it was sort of like here and
Right,
there,
sure.
if we need a little bit more than what the department has in their budget that's available to them to match the grant money.
So not for something like the matching grant for or the funds needed for, to get the grant, like say for the sidewalks, the bike lanes, like that was a lot,
Yeah,
that was a much
right.
higher.
Thought process was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
It's
no,
extra
this was
big.
Yeah.
for small leftover
Gotcha.
amounts
Okay.
specifically.
Makes
'Cause
sense.
The departments are budgeting for the grants that they're going for, and sometimes, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, the thought process was sometimes the numbers change a little bit and we need to add a little bit more, and this would make it easier for the departments to add that money without having to take it out of their operating budget somewhere else. So, but again, not knowing free cash, we're gonna hold off. Article 13 is zoning for, this one was the mother of all districts overlay, as we were referring to it last week. This is the This is the
Moffett.
the Moffett. It's
Moffett.
the multifamily MBTA specific zoning.
Okay.
And we did see maps and overlays about this. We did not choose to take any action last week. Trying to remember what our discussion was and what we were waiting for. I don't have notes on it.
Yeah, I didn't write any notes either, like what we were, why we didn't vote that one.
It's our-
We deferred the other-
Typically, we would defer. There were the next two we deferred on.
Was it because of the language wording needs to be added? Was there some uncertainty about that?
Not sure.
I know that they have revisited this, and then I have not incorporated any changes that Liz might have made as a result of Sean's comments and
Yeah.
some of the other discussions she's had with Land Use Council since, so that might be, whatever the changes are, I don't think they're gonna
Yeah,
affect.
Liz gave us a very good presentation on it, but I think that part of it was that they weren't
And it was something
they weren't completely done with it. So I think as I'm dialing back in my mind now, I think that the not taking any action on it last week was because they had said that they weren't done. So we
The
were
wording,
gonna
it says in
Yeah.
that little red, that they
Yeah.
want to fix the wording.
So expect
I
updates.
I do think that if our intention is to defer on this one, if we don't think that there is a significant financial impact that we need to have a say on, then I think we could defer.
You think it's less impactful than the NIF ban?
I can get any updated language to you for next week, though. if you
Yeah,
like.
we can certainly wait for next week if people
I
want.
mean, that was kind of a serious question. I mean, it could significantly impact revenue, like tax revenues, right?
So one of the key things with this that Liz pointed out is we have to zone for this because the state
Oh, I remember.
requires us to zone for it. We don't have to actually approve anything within those zones.
Well, they still go through the usual
They
permitting
go
process.
through, they
so if
go
we don't
through
have
the
water,
permitting. the
Until they
permitting
appeal,
process.
but then that's.
A lot of it
Yes.
becomes by right, though.
Yeah.
That's the point of the zoning, is that they can do a lot of the stuff by right.
Right.
Whether it'll actually happen or not
Yeah,
is a
different
story.
story, so.
Well, okay. I mean, I don't think town votes for this, to be honest with you, but I think if we looked at it from a purely financial perspective, this would benefit revenue.
well, it would also have an impact on the school system and
Yeah,
town
there's-
resources and
there's
police and
definitely a
fire. yeah.
divided
Why don't we get more chapter 70?
impact on it.
And aren't we getting close to that building being pretty full? I was just told they were full the other day.
High school?
School?
No,
No, not at all? All right.
no.
I was told,
I was not told that. What
Oh.
I've been told is that the issues are just with the other buildings and the age of them. It's not a capacity issue yet.
I do know that we talked with them at one point and that building was getting closer to
The newer
the
one.
new one. But with the buildings that we do have in the town, there's ability to shift things and move as needed. But schools are coming in next week, so we can certainly talk to them about that.
Well, I guess, Andrew, to your point, it furthers that there's an implication to this financially, whether it's good or bad.
No, I don't disagree there's a financial implication, but traditionally we've just deferred to the planning board on these because
Correct.
they've taken all that, they're supposed to take all that into consideration.
They had their meeting tonight, it was one person
I think we can also, in the past, when we feel strongly about something, even if some people feel like it doesn't have a financial impact and other people do, sometimes we take a vote just to give our thoughts that we've looked at it, that we've discussed it, and whether the majority of us support it or not.
Was this voted on already? Sorry.
This was not, no, we did not vote on it last week.
I do think there's an element of the folks at town meeting do listen to what
Yes.
like.
Oh, they
our
definitely listen to
committee
what our
says.
recommendation is.
Yeah, and when we
So-
defer, we, eliminate any kind of influence altogether, which I guess would be the point of deferring, but when there is a implication, whether good or bad financially, I do think it's important that we weigh in as a committee.
I would agree with that.
So I said I was going to be better about making
Yeah,
recommendations
yeah.
before,
Oh, so-
before
yeah.
discussing, and I have
Recommendation.
not been, so.
Should we wait until the appropriate language has been added?
That sounds like a great idea. And
Are
so
we
that
all okay
we
with
could then,
holding off until next week or the week after?
You want
before
to
voting on this?
push it? Yeah, I could push it, I don't think next week would be good, but the following week I can ask Liz or Rick as the chairman of the planning
well,
board to come in.
do we even need them to come in? We've already listened, right? Maybe we just need the language? I don't know, I'm just asking.
Have you read it so far?
Some of it.
I mean, the language is really, it's only gonna, it's not gonna change anything really, it's more housekeeping stuff, so it's not, there's nothing in there that's
The
gonna.
language isn't going to change any potential financial impact.
But if we don't adopt it too, then we're gonna be in the
Well,
position
then-
of Milton, and we're gonna
then-
lose grants, and then we're
Yeah.
gonna fund it.
Yeah.
Which would be a
That's-
good,
There's a financial implication either way.
That's a,
Right.
that's a definite financial implication.
Liz will be happy to tell you just about how many millions of dollars that we got last year in grants that we wouldn't have gotten had we been in the position that Milton's in.
So then maybe it is important for the.
What position,
if we're
what
gonna-
position is Milton in?
Milton has
They had grant money taken away.
not appropriately zoned for it, and they are having grants either rejected or rescinded from the state because of it.
Grants to do with what?
Primarily to deal with
Housing and community development and things like
and
that.
transportation.
Yeah, but they might be okay with that.
They might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, I have no idea.
I will say
I'm
Milton's
assuming,
tax base is
I'm assuming.
Yeah, a little
assuming
bit
they're doing
different.
all right.
We can't afford it.
And maybe they think they can afford it and can't.
I don't know, do they go as far as starting to attack their, go beyond chapter 90 money, but maybe their unrestricted money, and then do they take away their chapter 70 money? How far does it go?
So maybe it would be good to have Liz come in and just give a quick,
She won't know those answers, but she'll know.
yeah, but to give a quick
update.
update on the financial implications of yay or nay on this and why they're
So we
supporting
won't
it.
wait until we hear from Liz. You think the 20th?
Yeah, I mean, I'll check with her tomorrow, I just think next week we got enough.
So we do have
Yeah,
enough
no,
next week.
yeah.
So
And it seems like this one could take a little more time than
Yeah.
the
okay.
Articles.
Articles.
You're right, it's a freedom.
Yeah, I'm still looking
Articles-
for the return, the 10
Articles
cent.
14 and 15, both zoning articles, FEMA flood zones for 14, and floodplains and wetlands for 15. We voted last week to defer both of these. Any interest in taking them back up?
I'm interested in looking into them more. I know.
All right, Article 16, surplus disposal of land at 0 Linwood Street. We talked about this in a good amount last week.
What parcel is that?
So Linwood goes from Ames Knoll down across Groveland
Yeah.
to near 123 behind Walmart, and this is where it ends like in that area behind Walmart off of, what's the name of the street?
Linwood?
No, the one that it intersects with.
Oh, High Street in Brockton Ave, right?
No, it's not, it's not.
It's the side street there, like where Dr. North used to be.
Oh, yeah.
Not Dr. North.
I
Dr.
knew it
Valaka.
last week, it's close to my house,
I
but
thought they had a map.
hang on, I've got it. Mill
Mill
Street.
Street.
Court, yeah, I grew up there.
Yeah.
So what part is it?
So it's right at the end.
At the Mill Street, Linwood,
So it's all that
Intersection.
grassy area at the.
kind of, I think where that, it kind of gets wet, is that the,
It probably is. It looks like it's fairly
because
wet.
it slopes down there.
Yeah. It
Yeah, that's all on
connects
a
to
hill
much
up
larger
here.
parcel.
That right there.
No,
Is it?
because you wouldn't be able to get to the houses.
The spot behind it.
Is that Walmart?
Really?
That's Walmart right here.
Yeah, so I guess it.
I remember looking
Yeah,
at
it's
it.
further up.
connected
Yeah.
to another part that we had already done.
Yeah, here's you, yeah, so it kind of comes in here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They just built a house there, 12 acres.
So and it's a very small parcel that is,
That's where I grew up.
the larger parcel has already been surplused. This is like a connector leftover piece.
Can I see, Matt?
Yep.
You're not likely to have any access from Linwood.
So where Mill Street
But I want
is
to
your,
Dispose of the larger
over
piece,
here.
and this might help.
no, but I mean, your
wanna
cursor is
dispose of
your,
it for
the arrow
a mixed-use
on the,
development,
is
or
it that?
Somewhere
Mixed
around there.
income
We're not sure
residential
exactly.
development.
Upside down, so somewhere around here, Scott thinks. So,
So it's about selling, like we would sell it.
Yeah, I would not, yeah, we would just sell it outright with a restriction on what could go there.
It's to dispose through the off.
so as
That's legal.
As we discussed last week, there's stages for town-owned property that you have to take before you can actually sell something. And the first is marking it as surplus. And this has already been marked as surplus. And the second, or no, this is to mark this as surplus, correct?
And the
This
other
is
piece,
to mark it as surplus and authorize the disposal. It doesn't seem like, for whatever reason, it was on the list back when they did a lot of other
We
properties.
did a bunch of properties all at
And does it
once,
maybe not have, is it maybe
like
prop,
right-of-way, not frontage.
is there not access to it?
There is, it's just, I think it was mostly because it was wet. It's very wet from the access from Linwood and even the access from the other parcel that they did dispose of, where it's connected to. Or they thought it was all one large parcel at the time, because sometimes parcels will just, if they're in co-ownership, they'll just marry. But it doesn't look like they did that, judging by the descriptions of them. But there is an upland section to it, so in combination with the other parcel, it will probably provide a benefit for whoever buys the bigger parcel.
But then they could, and then they could,
But they would never, it is too wet, they wouldn't be able to access it either from Linwood or the
Right,
larger
right.
parcel. It was like a river.
Thanks for rehashing that. Appreciate it.
So any desire to reopen the vote on that? We voted to recommend. Article 17 is banning NIPS. We voted to defer to the Board of Health. Is there any desire to reopen our vote on Article 17? Or should we wait until the Board of Health is here next week?
I'll keep to myself tonight. Maybe I'll just express it at town meeting.
Article 18 is the stable fee, which we're going to talk to the Board of Health about next week. Any desire to discuss that right now? Article 19, the Senior Citizen and Veteran Tax Work-Off Abatement Program. We voted unanimously to recommend. Any desire to reopen? Article 20 was the Accrued liabilities and compensated absences fund. This is, we had a lot of discussion on this one. It is when someone goes out on leave, we leave the position vacant, pay them sick and vacation. This creates a fund to pay out of instead of balancing it in a different way.
And best management practices for our finances in our new financial policies that we would do this. Our auditors will appreciate it.
And that affects our rating.
Yeah, I mean, the more that we have policies, and certainly the more that we follow our policies, the happier that the bonding companies are.
Right.
Yeah, and I remember they did complain, well, they didn't complain, but they made note of us doing transfers after the fact. And this allows us to
not do that.
not do the,
Yeah,
or
we
do
typically-
the transfer
we
from
typically
a
paid
pool
for
that's
it.
already allowed for it.
Yeah, we typically paid for it out of leaving the position open, which also meant we were missing.
Right, not able to, yeah.
Not able to fill.
Cover the job.
So that we cover that,
So did we vote on this?
We did not vote on this because we didn't know what the number was gonna be. Is the 166
Well,
accurate? And it's,
Still
is this a
free
free
cash.
cash?
Yeah.
So this is another free cash, so we should probably hold off on this. But is the 166 accurate? Because last week we had talked about 156 as being the likely number.
I think it's 166, yeah.
Okay. Because it was needing it to be double the 5-year average and 5 year, in my notes. Admittedly, I might not have put the correct notes. My notes said it needed to be specified that it should be double the 5-year average. The average is 78K, so 156 would be the number. So, not doubting your math, those are the notes that I took, that's all. 166 could be the right number as
Yeah, I thought it was,
more up to
I
date.
remember it being over 80, but
Yeah.
My notes have 166 from last week.
Yeah, see, it could be my notes that have gone. So. All right, so hold off on that until we know free cash. Article 21.
Same thing.
My notes say that this is the same as the last one, but for unemployment.
And also a free cash issue.
Also free cash. So we'll hold off on that one as well. Article 22 is the charter update, which we just talked to Rick about. As he said, there's still 3 weeks before they have their final wording, but is there anything that we think will impact our decision to either recommend, not recommend, or defer?
I'd make a motion to defer to the,
It's a motion to
Second.
defer to
is it
the
the
charter
select,
committee,
the charter committee?
the charter review committee.
Charter review.
I'll
So a
second.
motion and a second discussion. I put in a lot of work.
Yeah,
Definitely put in a lot of
definitely.
work on it. And the implications to us are more for the benefits of the process than the actual finances of the town, as best I can tell. Like there
And
wasn't
if the
anything.
final version came up different, we could always reopen it. If
Yeah.
something came in, they tried to sneak something in.
Yeah.
Well, so my question is, did anyone see in Rick's presentation, did anyone see anything that they thought that's gonna change the finances of the town, we
I
should say
didn't.
something about that? 'Cause I didn't catch anything in there.
Probably some incidental stuff with, trainings and filings and things like that.
It's stuff I offer though anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, we do offer it and people do take advantage of it. And so I don't expect a big hit from it.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Recommendation is to defer. All those in favor of deferring to the Charter Review Committee?
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstaining? It is unanimous. Article 23 is the Griffin's Dairy Farm Well project that we discussed. What's that?
We don't have a number for that.
We don't, I kinda got the overall sense that maybe folks wanted them to go back to
CPC.
CPC for money anyways, but I'm still trying to get some.
Last week, that was definitely the sense of the meeting last week was that.
I mean, it does sound like a
community-
good,
Community preservation paid for the
yeah,
first
thing
part of
for-
the project, and this seems like something that community preservation should pay for. Like, it's the kind of thing
Yeah,
that's
that's-
appropriate for it.
that's-
Article 24, the St. Patrick's Day Parade detail and overtime. Last week we voted unanimously to recommend Article 24. Does anyone want to reopen Article 24? About that, Article 25 is borrowing $1.2 million to move the gas island at the DPW facility, which we voted to recommend, not unanimously. Does anyone want to reopen Article 25? About that, Article 26 is to close fund deficits. We talked, this is similar to year-end transfers. We didn't vote on it last week. We didn't have specific number. What's the,
There's no update, and we still don't have free cash, so.
so nothing to vote on now. Article 27 is to establish residential waste pickup and hauling enterprise fund. We did not vote on this last week. Updates?
motion to approve for
You get on.
discussion purposes.
It's a motion, is there a second?
Seconded.
It's a motion and a second.
Um,
So this would set up the fund that if we chose to have a pay for removal program for trash and recycle hauling that program would use.
So this is.
That is correct.
In addition to what we're already paying. Like-
So
like-
this
like a
doesn't-
bag, or Abington bag.
Like a pay per barrel.
This will
Not in
be,
addition to, it's.
nothing will
This is
change.
completely new.
Right.
Right, but so,
This article would simply set up a fund.
The foundation of getting.
It would lay the foundation for if we move to
Giving you a
like
trash bill.
like
To giving you a trash bill.
Oh, a trash.
So
bill.
for-
Bill.
Is it barrel? I was like,
Yeah.
so then
So
we,
for example, water, like sewer, they have enterprise funds.
Mhm.
This would set up an enterprise fund for trash removal, trash and recycle removal.
Just
It
in
wouldn't set up a law or a rule where the town is charging for it. It would set up the financial way for Andrew to track it and
Be able to charge for it.
to be able
to
to,
be
right,
able-
it's
We're
like
gonna hire
step
80,000.
one.
But correct me if I'm wrong,
Don't you
Scott,
worry.
but actually charging for it would need to go in front of a different town meeting, correct?
Yes, we don't have an article here. There's no language in here as far as the next steps. The next steps would be to allocate or reallocate the funds that are currently associated with waste hauling, which would be a town meeting vote, and then to set up, I guess, I don't know if it be town meeting or selectmen will eventually then decide what the fee will be.
I think it's a select person. Scott?
Select board
Members.
members.
Not yet.
Just trying to get on.
But
Why,
That's
why,
all the
can I ask, why do you
Trying to
have
be
this
good for
in
it.
here now? Because it's gonna create a furor when
Yeah,
Well, and
that's-
it may
someone's
get
gonna
withdrawn.
think
It may
it's the
get
wrong.
withdrawn, but
Yeah.
we're
The
going to
condo
leave
they're
it
gonna
in
throw
there for
a
now.
fit.
No, I know you're gonna need it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't, it's just,
It may not make it to town meeting this year,
Yeah.
but until I'm sure that we're not going to have to do it, or not going to have to go down that road this year, I'm gonna leave it on there and we're
oh,
gonna
I
have these
see,
discussions.
okay, I got it.
So is it?
That's what I was asking, I just, it's just in case you have to add something
If we need a
else.
plan B, we've got it.
Yes, okay, good.
So is this
Makes
coming
sense.
from the increasing costs of?
Yeah, I mean, the costs have gone up since, over the years, dramatically. Right now, costs, and it's not just the cost of that, but the drain it is on the budget. It's $1.5 million or $1.6 million this year. And it's just continually draining from other parts of the budget that are also growing. And right now, I mean, we started off this year with a $1.9 million or $2 million plus deficit. And granted, a lot of that was asks. And even whittling down those asks on our part, it still brought us to a point where we still have a $300,000 deficit. Going into next year, and also we are using, one-time funds that we know that we typically wouldn't use to balance a budget. We were using health insurance proceeds, we're using opera funds, we're taking stuff out of the budget, the laptops, which I know I argued that I don't want them in there, but laptop, desk, or learning materials. There's other things that we're taking out of the budget that we're paying for with free cash. So I'm fairly confident that we're going to be okay this year. We don't have to do this. We will absolutely have to do something next year, or we're likely to lose services. Not even just be able to go level service. Certainly not gonna be able to add services, but we will likely lose services. There'll be a profound effect.
What do you
This
mean
is
by
one
lo-
way to bridge that gap.
What do you mean by lose services?
We won't be able to fully fund what the school's going to be looking for and what the town's gonna be looking for.
But I
So
mean-
there'll be probably layoffs.
The flip side of that is like, this is a service that everybody in the town utilizes. So if you're a 50-year-old with your 4-bedroom house who don't have kids in the school system, don't go to the senior center, don't use the library, trash comes every week and you're driving the roads. And those are probably the only 2 services you utilize.
Well, I would argue that having a good school system and those
It
other
increases your
amenities,
tax,
greatly
your
increase the
property
value of
values,
your
but
home.
still, like, this is the one thing, those people still have that. It's
So,
tying them to the
Water
town.
and sewer.
We've also had an override for trash, and we're not,
you
you'd be
had that
charging.
15 years ago.
I
when it was
understand.
under $1 million.
Trust me, I get it. Something needs to be done about the trash, however,
I had an idea a while ago.
That-
was the
that-
idea?
The idea was we stop recycling because it actually goes in the landfill, which the recycling is more money. I don't know how
That-
much it
that
would
I
actually
just-
save, which I guess it's against the law or rules or
Yeah.
some.
but
So-
we'd be,
but-
still be
Whatever.
keeping the
Quick
money
point.
in the tax levy.
Quick
and then
point
charging.
to Andrew's comment, those people without kids in the school system, not seniors, also do use water and sewer, which are fee-based.
Yeah, but that is, I'm paying for what I'm using as
And
opposed
that's,
to, you know,
and that's in
Well, the
theory,
trash is.
and that's in theory what the trash.
not
We're
necessarily
saying
the
right now,
same,
like,
you know.
I
You're
don't-
paying
Yeah,
as part of the
like
budget,
you're
right?
But I don't
water,
get a
and
bill.
your
You don't get
Yeah,
a
yeah,
bill.
bill
part
is
of your
paying
tax.
for you
Yes.
to
Part of your
receive
tax.
water.
But if I have
My
a
wife
pool,
pays it.
It's just-
I'm not
it's
gonna
just-
pay the
it's just
same
a
as a
new
little
tax.
old lady in a
Right,
one-bedroom
it's all-
apartment. Like,
it's-
so
it's-
No,
it's-
absolutely.
Add another
Yeah,
one
it's
of those
based on
line
your
items to the
usage,
tax.
Exactly,
whereas
as
a
opposed to
single
trash
person
is
living in
like-
a house
The
that's paying a
fire
trash
department
bill,
wasn't enough.
you know,
There
and then
are-
you've got a
there are
family with.
towns
Yeah, whatever.
that do a paper bag,
The paper bag
which
thing is
is
awful.
which is
I don't even know how
But
they.
that isn't what this,
that
I know.
seems.
Yeah, how do you?
Well,
this
do
is just
that?
a lot of
A lot of
But you
oversight.
bring it there.
Yes.
Yes.
It's not
It's
curbside.
a lot of overhead.
In this particular
But there'll
program,
be a lot of argument.
Yeah, we can talk about
It
that
would be,
when we have to talk about
optional too. So if a homeowner
Oh, you got that.
wanted to find their own service that's less expensive.
I know, but you're
they
going to
won't.
get the people are going to say, we're paying for it in our taxes because that's
Well, they
what
won't be
we.
anymore though.
Right, but, so they're not getting a break on their taxes, and they're also getting a new bill. So it's gonna be need to be a really big discussion with a lot of informational
It will definitely be
and,
a
Well,
very large discussion
maybe
at
that's-
town meeting.
Maybe that's something that you guys could try to work out, is making the tax bill lower, maybe not as low as what you would collect, but that could be a benefit to some people. Saying, all right, you know what, we're gonna go down, I don't know, make, 1%, I have no idea. But that whatever percent goes down, you then are paying for this, just because this is how much we think every single household pays for, that we collect for trash.
We actually do think that there'd probably be some sort of, because there was an override associated with some sort of a rollback that we would use to fund that first year, so that first year would be discounted. Probably be the easiest way for us to do it.
And with this, you wouldn't be able to move the money to free cash, right? It would have to stay in the enterprise fund.
Oh, yeah, the money that goes into this. So the fees would be set every year. The fees would be basically to cover the expenses associated with it.
But if there's surplus,
If there's surplus, we'd either reduce the fees the following year and use that to offset it, or, I don't know, we
we just want
also.
to make sure we're not buying like a truck with it, like or.
You're gonna have to figure out like the
That would
barrel
go to
that have
town
be
meeting. though.
replaced every. You're gonna have
So like the other
Yeah, and-
funds like water and sewer, if we were gonna spend something from it beyond, if we were gonna buy more barrels, like we'd probably, like we do now, we'd go to town meeting and say, we need $45,000 to buy, X amount of
But wouldn't
barrels.
you just keep a stock in the fund because you're gonna have to replace barrels periodically, like just
Yeah.
have that as a built-in cost?
Are we on discussion right now?
We have,
Yeah.
we have a
We're
motion, we have a motion and we're in discussion.
So it's mostly for something that we're not gonna do.
So,
This year.
So,
I mean, I actually see this as being a bit proactive to a potential problem that you've identified. So
Yeah.
like, I'm not super against this because there's some sense
And-
in it. So I get
and
like,
Unlike my other
and-
schemes,
well, to that point, and to the point of,
now the nip bottles though.
to that point and to the point of this is something that is going to be a big discussion for the town, it might be better to leave this on the agenda for this year and have the start of that discussion at town meeting this year, because it would be really difficult to say we were doing this next year and we took the trash and recycle money out of the budget, and then the town said no to this. Then we have 1 point something million that we have to try to recover, so we have to have two budgets prepared.
it is definitely a way to get the word out there, so to speak, because when people see it on
This
their,
would certainly, this would certainly
warrant.
start that discussion in the town.
This is just creating flexibility, really.
So
Accounting flexibility.
So creating the enterprise fund is, I think is what Chris is saying, is creates flexibility. To me, having the article on town meeting to create the fund starts the conversation with the town. With Rick, with the Charter Commission, was talking about communicating better, might be a way to start communicating better before we're actually looking to implement something.
I was just gonna say, and so it is, since it is towards the end of the warrant, you might wanna bring a comfortable seat, because I'm sure it will be.
I just, and again, I don't want to be, but it's not really creating flexibility because we have no issues paying it. We have no issues paying this at all. This is not, there's no actual issue paying this bill ever in any year. Am I right?
There has not been.
Okay, so the flexibility is to lay a foundation to do something.
Right, yeah, in the future.
So, but that's what I'm saying.
To
The flexibility.
So it really
yeah.
is, it's the same thing as voting, do you remember when we had a vote for the 3 million on the 30 million? Or the, sorry,
No,
it's like it's
yeah.
it's
it's
kind
the same
of,
thing.
It's
If we
kind of
don't
like
say
that,
yes to
but without
this,
actually
we never
paying.
get over to here.
Except
Yeah,
that we can
this has
except
no
that we can
monetary.
bring this up again future.
Yes, you can bring it up all the time.
So my point is, I don't think we need to create the account right now, because we're not trying, like, if we're not trying to do this year, we don't need to create the enterprise account. However, if we start the discussion now, that might be better for the town.
I'm confused. You want to leave it on the article
I-
for town meeting?
I'm leaning towards leaving it on the warrant as an article. That's my leaning at the moment.
For the actual meeting?
For
Or
the
just
actual-
For discussion purposes?
For the
going up to it?
meeting, for the meeting.
Isn't that just going to the point, isn't that just gonna blow up the meeting? Because you don't have a plan, so you're gonna come in and say, let's create a fund to collect
Well,
revenue
we've got a
without
plan.
a plan that anybody knows about or that's been publicized, you've had hearings about.
This
People are
definitely
gonna be
didn't
pissed.
just pop up.
So, but I think this has been brought up
We have discussed it at
Yeah.
length.
I know.
Yeah.
many times over
But
the
Isn't
not
that
years.
everyone's watching our
But
meeting, and to your point,
exactly.
informationals and.
The way that this
Baseball at a
would go
baseball
into
game.
place wouldn't be with public hearings, it would be with town meeting, correct?
Yeah.
So to me,
But
it's,
aren't you
to me,
wanting
this is
like
al-
informational
to
sessions?
me, this is
before
almost
that?
like having an informational session for it at town meeting, where you're gonna have more people than you would have.
You will definitely have a captive audience.
I think it's just gonna, people are gonna be,
Oh,
not understand the distinction between the fund and the actual program
I-
and think they're voting on that.
And
it's gonna
I
be
think that challenge would be on
Train wreck.
me being up in front of the podium.
Well, I suppose it's better to do
try.
it now and have it not be understood and have it get voted down than to wait till we really need it, if that's the way that we go, if
And
that's
if
what
we-
ends up
and if-
happening
if we
and
go
get voted
and
down.
Make
But we
it
never
clear
really
that
did.
this is just for the
We're
fund,
going
and it's
to.
not for
Allegedly.
actually
Possibly.
creating the fee, and it is overwhelmingly rejected by town meeting. That gives us a pretty
It's a
good,
good idea what's going
gives us
on.
a pretty good idea as to whether or not we would actually be able to push it through when Scott wanted it, if Scott wanted it
Dipping the
in the
toe.
future, so
Dip it in.
might
I don't-
take Plan B and throw Plan B out the window if that's what happens.
So, a question I have is, one, I wouldn't even know where to bring my trash if we didn't have trash being collected. So would it be like an opt-in program?
It would be an opt.
It,
It would be an
no, I think it'd be an
opt-out.
opt-out. Anybody who we're dealing with now who already has a trash barrel, we're gonna assume, unless you tell us otherwise, we will come to your house and pick up the trash and you're gonna get a bill. If you say, hey, come and get my barrel, I'm out.
Yeah.
Schultz is gonna drive down there with the pickup truck and grab the barrel, you won't get a bill.
What do they do in this MFOD area?
Same thing. They
dumpsters.
put it all on the T.
Goes to Plymouth.
Oh, yeah.
So
This will be like the most fun.
backtracking very briefly to the point that Greg made about, hey, if we know we're going to be creating this fee that everyone's going to pay, do we find a way to not raise, like to lower taxes at least a little bit or something to that effect? If we're saying, I think along those lines, if we're saying we're taking 1.5 or 1.7 million dollars out of the, like, what's required in the general fund, maybe not account on using all 1.7 million dollars of that in the budget, so that there's money left and we're not spending to the possible limit that we can spend to, would be a way to balance that. And we know that spending only goes up every year, but if we go up by less than what we could go up by, that would be.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's our current plan and hope on getting through this year and then trying to forecast next year. The upside to next year is, you know, we'll be at the end of most of our agreements.
What do we budget per household that this is?
It's not just single family
Yeah, because
households
I'm
either.
gonna walk in.
Right.
and-
What?
Not just single family households either.
Basically.
4 or
That's what
5
it is.
sets of
You
condos.
don't have
Yeah,
anybody.
that's what-
And all of the apartment complexes.
So our,
Not all.
Okay, not all.
It's-
And
I think
at
it's
least all have
going
dumpsters,
going
but some
forward
have
that
barrels,
year.
so.
No, they don't have
Nobody's gonna
barrels.
settle
Some
on
of
it,
the apartment complex, like the one right out here, I can't remember the name of it. They use dumpsters and they're on municipal.
But even with this money in the budget,
Yeah.
we're at a deficit.
Yes, oh, yes.
So how we're going to give back any money or knock off any money, I don't know how that.
Here's the thing, if we're at a deficit right now of 300,000 to 400,000, and we have waste removal at 1.5 million.
Yeah.
If we took the 1.5 million out, we would be at 1.1 to 1.2 surplus.
Except we've got probably $1.2 million in other funds that we're using as one-time funds.
Correct.
So
Right,
that's
we're
where-
gonna keep ending
Right.
up back
So,
in the same situation of,
It's- But that's the
Soon, we're gonna have to pay for the, like,
that's the thing to figure out.
like if your house is on fire, you have
Yeah,
to pay for
that's
the
what I
fire.
said,
yeah.
at least I know
Put a
my,
toll
all
on,
my.
I was
Employment
thinking of
agreements
toll
won't
to
be
come
going
into
up.
town.
Yeah, I'm
Certainly
just
not
saying,
the
it
matter.
never ends.
And we're, most of, I think, the debt may be going up a little bit, for sure, in FY '26. But that's our, that's our work that we got ahead of us for next year.
And we just
Don't
this
anybody
discussion
retire.
to when there's a,
Well, we have to vote.
So,
the discussion about whether we should do the trash or not, that isn't what
That's
this is
later date.
about.
That's a later date.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can
So-
refer and discuss that when we have to worry about it. Right now, we're discussing that.
right now, the discussion is,
And it's
should
got
we
nothing.
create the enterprise fund or not?
Yes,
I
exactly.
personally think it's an intelligent step to a problem that we might see in the future.
But couldn't you just create the fund and the program at the same time if town meeting has to vote on the program?
But what if they vote against it?
Then
So,
why do we have a fund if they're gonna vote against it? Like, why are we putting this cart before the horse? Like, let's have the town
So
vote
you
on
can
the
see
actual
what the
program.
feel of the town is and get the discussion going, I think.
But we're not coming in with anything concrete. That's what, like, we're saying,
Before you can,
we
before
wanna-
you start selling your products.
open up a bank
Seems a
account,
little,
but we're not gonna tell you how much money we're gonna put in there, where it's coming from, and what the implications
so
are.
until, so if we set this up until
Using
further
all of your
votes,
money
we
to
would
buy
be
a
putting
piggy bank.
nothing in it.
So why don't we just do them both at the same time? I still don't understand that.
So we definitely could do them both at the same time.
Hmm.
That is absolutely.
What's the benefit of
A possibility.
of
So
just
my,
going in there to say, let's create this account for maybe we'll use it, we're not gonna tell you when or
For the
how or what.
conversation.
so that,
Just
Well,
an
it's certainly
unstructured
easier-
conversation about
It's an easier conversation
I
for
think
Scott
it-
to have.
yeah, I
Then
think this becomes a
both of them,
structured
I think.
conversation, where this is the one thing that we're talking about. And saying,
Scott
this
might
is
lose hair if he has to go up in front of
his eyebrows.
I mean, you're going to have the most people that weigh in on things at town meeting
Well, and,
because they're going to see this ahead of time in the warrant.
yeah,
And so that's going to draw more people that you can discuss and have the discussion anyways.
yeah, Andrew, I was where you are when we started talking about this tonight. And the potential of having the discussion before we actually have to have the discussion and starting that process and understanding what the town's appetite for this might be has leaned me to keeping it on there. But I definitely, like I said, I was where you were 20 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, however long it was that we started this. So I definitely understand your thing, and we absolutely could do it whenever it is that we need to do it. But my concern is if we go to do it when we need to do it and the town doesn't want any part of it, that's gonna,
Well, if the
We
town
need to
doesn't
have
want
a
any part
plan
of
B.
it- If the town
Yeah,
doesn't want any
that's
part of it, we wouldn't need it anyway.
And also from a financial committee perspective, if you look at it just from that and knowing the problems that we have with the trash and the dollars and.
Yep.
Sorry.
No, I'm actually literally like looking at the lights.
I think it makes sense for us to really look at it from financial responsibility.
yeah, financial planning.
I mean, I sure don't want to pay more for sure.
But then that would mean,
I can comfortably say I don't think anybody on this committee wants to pay an extra trash removal fee.
But if we need to have an account at some point,
But it's,
10 years from now,
one, I
not
don't
that it
care.
would be 10,
Two,
but
I'm being
just if
serious.
we need to
I know.
have
Two,
that account,
if if
We
we're
will
gonna do
have it.
this,
Or we won't if it doesn't.
the ice and snow removal needs to go, like, those are the things that, like, you would wanna say, okay, this is gonna be in the budget for this, and never have this as a, well, but we do it because we can do it, right? That's what I've heard.
And
not
it's
from
the
you,
only
but
one we can do
forever. Well, it's not the only thing.
It is the only one that we could deficit spend in.
Yeah.
Snow and ice is the only budget you can deficit spend.
Trash isn't?
No.
But where are we?
Cannot deficit spend in trash. You have to pay your bill.
We have a contract for trash.
Correct.
If we have costs over the contract, we have to
Pay it.
do transfer.
Have we ever run over?
I don't think we have.
No,
Not at
because
the time.
nobody ever wants to have the issue of, that's a big issue. Not that having your snow and ice getting
But that's
picked
my
up.
point. It's the
yeah.
same thing. So it's like, you
But
know,
the
at
state
some
allows
point,
you.
you're going to have like little things on your tax bill, and it's just going to be.
Aye.
Again, I'm good, but I think a
If
lot
you
of
can
people
opt out
would
of
be.
snow and ice.
I could. I would love to.
Don't drive on town
It
roads.
ruins my grass for the spring and summer.
So, I think we have had a very good amount of discussion on this article. Is there anything?
I think it went a whole different direction than what Scott was expecting.
It definitely did.
I'm actually, I'm willing to speak to it at town meeting, and I'm certainly will have a much more clear picture of what the plan is. But it'll have to be a discussion in unison with the school department, because the the ramifications of not doing this next year, it's gonna have a profound effect on them too.
What about the millionaires tax money? When does that start rolling in? Isn't that for transportation in schools? So shouldn't
That's
that
a very good question.
Yeah.
That the state-
resolve some
that
of
the
these
state
issues?
has
I
not
wouldn't
answered.
count on it.
This is part of why we expected more money from the state than we got this year.
I don't
Well, they
And
didn't.
why
they
we're
didn't- they didn't collect that
in the
yet.
position that we are trying to
They didn't
fill
they
the
didn't-
budget gap.
That's not collected yet.
It's not.
Millionaire's tax? No, I don't believe so. This is the first year I believe it's in effect. So
Yeah.
your taxes that you would be paying remitting for last year.
They still have to hire all those IRS agents.
So,
I don't love that we're already kind of spending the money though. Because you mentioned that school department's gonna be in unison with the school department, so there's already an idea of where the money's gonna shift.
Well, there's no way around it. I mean, I think just their contractual obligations on this year alone was over $1 million increase in their budget.
then they're already what, half of our total budget?
They're a little more than that. Yeah.
This
So-
counting chapter 7.
Yeah, and so, they have their needs like every other department here. So there will be an increase over there, and I don't know that we'll be able to cover it without some of this money being allocated. And that's the whole reason, believe me, if I thought we could cover the budget and we were, going to be close, I would advocate, and I have been advocating to find a way to do something about this since I got here, because it just doesn't work. I probably would have advocated for some sort of a smaller rollback, like you had suggested.
I'm gonna state this for the record, this is completely a joke. Do we have some wetlands we could just dump?
Plenty.
Didn't we just,
Just looking for other options, fictionally.
so can we vote on this?
Yes. So we have a recommendation to, what was the recommendation? Recommended to
approve.
approve Article 27. We have discussed significantly. All those in favor of approving the article to establish an enterprise fund, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
It is recommended 5-3.
I thought that was 5-4, no.
No, we don't have 8.
3,
We only have 8.
Debate.
very attractive.
people.
It was you, Marty, and Greg.
Dime piece.
Oh, I thought you were.
Darn.
You would know.
No, I was moving my glasses.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
was
Only
just-
now.
I don't know. I think we count it. I think we count it.
That's how you accidentally buy something
Yeah.
at an auction.
I gotta be careful of that.
All right, 2 remaining articles. Article 28 is to borrow $2, or is that just $2 signs?
That's $2 signs is not, that wasn't
$2 for the Memorial Field improvements. The town moderator is going to come and discuss that with us at a future meeting. Is that next week? Next week. So we can hold off, unless anyone feels otherwise, we can hold off until next week to make a recommendation on that. And then new article, article number 29, to revoke the opioid settlement stabilization fund that we just created.
Motion to recommend.
Second.
Article
A
29.
motion and a second. This is because, as stated earlier in the meeting, because the state changed the language to negate the need for this. Any further discussion on Article 29?
I actually have a quick question for Scott. There was something in the Globe a couple weeks ago about how towns haven't been spending this money. Is this the reason why we haven't been spending the money?
Yeah, and oddly enough, like we put it out there that, you know, we were ready to start spending it and, you know, folks wanted to come to us, we were gonna deal with it like CPEA does and put something together for town meeting. And we actually didn't get a lot of, I think maybe 2 people came to us finally.
Have you talked with Abington Copes?
Yeah, I think they might be one of them. But we also need specific, we don't, you know, it's like, don't come to us and say, hey, we could use $50,000 for it. We'd like to know exactly
Yeah,
what your plan is.
plan, yeah.
But, so I do believe they have a couple of programs now that have come to them. But, yeah, oddly enough, it was kind of a slow start.
And then we had a discussion about wanting to hire an additional part-time employee in the health department, right? Could we fund something like that through the opioid settlement stabilization?
I don't know, probably not. Unless they were really specifically just dealing with that,
Okay.
that, you know, there's probably a lot of services that they could provide, but it would be new services, things that we don't currently provide. I'm sure if I asked Lindsay to come up with it, she could figure it out.
Okay. That was all I had.
Any further questions or discussion on Article 29? Without any, all those in favor of recommending Article 29?
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstaining? Marty's glasses are opposed.
I pulled the U.
It is unanimous. That takes us to the end of our articles. Does not, however, take us to the end of our agenda. Available meeting minutes. We did have 3 sets of meeting minutes provided to
I'll leave
us.
that to you folks.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let
Do
me
you need
find-
Andrew for the minutes?
No, I don't think we do.
Have a good night.
You too. Thank you, Andrew.
Sure you don't wanna hang out?
I want to go to bed.
Me too.
So, meeting minutes from, let's start with January 17th.
I remember, well,
Let's see,
Wait, last year or this year?
this year. Dan, Barbara, and Sarah were not here and thus cannot vote on them. Is there a motion?
motion to approve meeting minutes from January 17th,
Motion from Chris,
2024.
second from Andrew. Any discussion on the meeting minutes from January 17th? Without any, all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes of January 17th?
Aye.
All those opposed, abstaining? It is unanimous. The minutes are approved. Thank you. Next set was meeting minutes for February 7th.
Motion to approve meeting minutes for February 7th, 2024.
There's a motion from Barbara. Is there a second?
I wasn't here. Was I here?
Yep.
I think we're all here.
Dan was not.
I'll second.
Second from Sarah. Any discussion on the February 7th meeting minutes? All right, without any discussion, all those in favor of approving the February 7th meeting minutes?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? Abstaining. Dan's abstaining. So they are approved. And we also have the meeting minutes for last week, February 28th. And Barbara and Dan were not here. Is there a motion for last week's meeting minutes?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion from Andrew, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Sarah, narrowly beating Marty. Any discussion on the February 28th meeting minutes? Very expertly prepared. No discussion, all those in favor of approving the minutes?
Approve.
Opposed? Abstaining?
Abstaining.
The minutes are approved. Are there any liaison reports? No liaison reports. There is no correspondence. Our next meeting is next Wednesday, March 13th. We will have the school department. We will also have the town moderator and a representative from the Board of Health. So it's going to be a busy night. It's 9:20 right now. I would not expect to be reviewing our next meetings at 9:20 next week. Tentatively, we still have March 19th, 2 weeks from yesterday, tentatively set in the schedule. We will determine next week if we think we need that meeting. And then we are scheduled to meet on March 20th, which will be our last meeting before the April 1st town meeting. Any further discussion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn and a second. Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
All those opposed, abstaining? We are adjourned. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much more excited about town meeting.
It's gonna be awesome.
It's just,
If you, for some reason, like, need a form to start, I could probably hop in.
I'm guessing they will already have most people.
Okay.
We don't have a lot of.
Okay.